The Galactic Federation had watched Earth for years. It was a strange planet, full of contradictions. Humans were intelligent, but their technology was primitive compared to the great empires of the galaxy. They had no planetary shields, no space fleets guarding their orbit, and no massive defense stations. To the Draken Empire, Earth looked like an easy target. Warlord Varric stood on the bridge of his massive warship, Doomfang. His red eyes studied the blue planet below. It was a beautiful world, but to him, it was just another conquest. Another trophy for the Draken Empire. His second-in-command, Commander Rethak, growled in amusement. They don't even have a single orbital cannon. They won't last a day. Varric smirked. Humans are weak. They fight each other over small things. They are not ready for an enemy like us. The Draken fleet moved into position. Hundreds of warships, each armed with enough firepower to reduce a city to rubble, surrounded Earth. The invasion had begun. The first attack. The Drakens started by shutting down Earth's communications. Their advanced jammers silenced satellites, radios, and the internet. Humans would be blind and helpless. Then, the first wave of drop ships descended into Earth's major cities. Thousands of Drakon warriors, towering reptilian creatures in black armor, marched onto human streets. But something was strange. The humans weren't panicking. They weren't running in fear. They weren't screaming. They were just standing there, watching. A Draken officer, his claws gleaming, stepped forward in the middle of New York City. His voice boomed through his translator. "You are now subjects of the Draken Empire. Surrender, and you will be spared." A human, an old man wearing a simple jacket, smiled. "You have no idea what you just did." The officer growled. "What?" Then the lights went out. The first sign of trouble. All across the city, Draken weapons stopped working. Their advanced targeting systems malfunctioned. Their armor, strong enough to withstand plasma blasts, suddenly felt too heavy. The officer turned to his soldiers. "What's happening? Check your systems." Before anyone could react, Drakens started falling. One by one. No gunfire. No visible attackers. Just falling. The officer's eyes darted around. The human still stood there, watching, smiling. Then his communicator crackled. It was Commander Rethak. "Something is wrong. Our fleet, our ships are shutting down." Varric's voice came next, full of rage. "How? This planet has no defenses." But Earth did have defenses. They just weren't what the Drakens expected. A silent, deadly war. Above the planet, Draken warships lost control of their systems. Their engines turned off. Their weapons refused to fire. Their shields collapsed. "We're being hacked," an officer screamed on the bridge of Doomfang. But that's impossible. Their technology is primitive. Yet, somehow, Earth's primitive technology was tearing through their systems like a virus. Back on the surface, Drakon warriors fell without a fight. Snipers, hidden in buildings, took them down one by one. Small human drones, invisible to the eye, injected their armor with disabling nanites. The mighty Draken war machine was crumbling. The warlord's realization. Varric slammed his fist into the control panel. "This isn't possible. They should be weak." Commander Rethak swallowed hard. "Warlord, I don't think they were ever weak." Varric's blood ran cold. He stared at the planet below, finally understanding his mistake. Earth didn't need defense grids. It didn't need massive fleets. Because humans themselves were the defense. And the Drakens had just made the worst mistake of their existence. The Drakens took defensive positions, but nothing happened. No enemy fire, no explosions, just silence. Rethak felt something prick his skin. His armored suit, made of the strongest alloys in the galaxy, suddenly stopped responding. What? What is this? More Drakens collapsed. Some screamed, others just fell, never making a sound. Above them, The warships orbiting Earth began to shut down. On the bridge of the Doomfang, Warlord Varric slammed his fist on the control panel. Get those ships operational. Now. An officer turned, panic in his eyes. We can't. Warlord. Something is inside our systems. It's rewriting our controls. Varric bared his fangs. Who? The humans don't have this kind of technology. But they did. Earth didn't have shields because it didn't need them. Earth didn't have war fleets because it never needed them. The real weapons of Earth were its people. And the Drakons had just stepped into the deadliest battlefield in the galaxy, without even realizing it. The hunter becomes the hunted. Back on the surface, Rethak's squad was disappearing one by one. A soldier screamed, his body yanked into the shadows. No one saw what took him. Another turned, only to be met with a single bullet through his visor. A Drakon gunner fired wildly into the buildings. Shevjo Uwaris Elvias. Then a voice, human, calm and cold, echoed from the rooftops. You started this war. Now you get to see how we fight it. The remaining Drakons panicked. These weren't soldiers they were fighting. These were hunters. And they were the prey. A desperate retreat. Varric watched in horror as entire squads vanished. No bodies, no explosions, just gone. His empire's warriors, the strongest in the galaxy, were being slaughtered like cattle. For the first time in his life, Warlord Varric felt fear. He turned to his officers. Call for reinforcements. No response. All communication was dead. Varric clenched his fists. Pull our forces back. Now. But it was too late. Earth wasn't letting them leave. Warlord Varric paced across the bridge of Doomfang, his claws digging into the metal floor. This wasn't how it was supposed to go. Earth was supposed to be weak, an easy victory, a simple conquest. Instead, his elite warriors were vanishing, his warships were shutting down, and his army was being slaughtered in silence. Status report, he barked. An officer trembled. Our fleet is unresponsive, Warlord. Engines are dead, weapons are offline. We are locked out of our own systems. How? The officer hesitated. We don't know. It's like something is inside our computers. A virus, but more advanced than anything we've seen. Varric's blood ran cold. The humans were inside their systems. How? Their technology was primitive. They didn't have AI warfare, didn't have quantum hacking. And yet, their entire mighty fleet was now a graveyard in orbit. Earth didn't need battleships, because Earth was the weapon. The death of an invasion. On the surface, the nightmare continued. Drakon squads, once confident in their strength, were now desperate to survive. Rithak, the Drakon commander, led a small group of survivors through the ruins of their landing zone. Bodies of his fallen warriors littered the streets. Keep moving, he growled. We have to regroup. But the moment he turned a corner, a trap activated. A hidden EMP mine detonated, shutting down their suits and weapons. Drakons fell to the ground, helpless. Then, out of the shadows, humans emerged. Not in battle armor, not in mechanized suits, just ordinary humans, but armed with deadly precision. Rethak struggled to lift his rifle, but his body refused to move. His systems were dead. A human in a simple black jacket crouched beside him. He had no armor, no weapons in sight, yet his eyes were colder than space itself. You really thought we were defenseless, the human whispered. Then, with a press of a button on his wrist device, Rethak blacked out. The final blow. From orbit, Varric could see what was happening. His invasion force, thousands of warriors, reduced to nothing. His warships, floating, powerless. He had made a terrible mistake. Humans didn't fight like any species he had encountered before. They didn't stand in lines and engage in traditional warfare. They fought like ghosts, like hunters, like something designed to kill without being seen. Varric's second-in-command turned to him, his voice shaking. "Warlord, we have lost." For a long moment, Varric said nothing. Then, with a voice filled with rage and fear, he growled, "We need to leave. Now." But Earth had other plans. Because now, it was humanity's turn to attack. The Doomfang hung lifeless in Earth's orbit. Once a mighty warship, it was now a floating coffin. Warlord Varric clenched his fists as he stared at the dark screens of his command deck. No weapons, no shields, no communication. The Draken fleet was dead in space, like a collection of wrecks, except no battle had even taken place. "Get our systems back online," he roared. His officers worked furiously, but it was useless. The virus, or whatever the humans had done, had infected everything. They weren't just jammed, they were completely shut out. Commander Rethak's distress signal had been the last message before everything went dark. Then, silence. Varric felt something he hadn't felt in decades. Fear. The hunters reveal themselves. Back on the surface, the remaining Draken warriors try to run. They scattered into the ruins of their landing zones, their weapons useless, their armor more of a burden than a shield. But the humans didn't let them escape. They came from the shadows, from the rooftops, from the very air itself. Small, silent drones zipped through the streets, injecting nanites into Draken armor, making them even slower, weaker. Snipers, unseen and patient as death, picked off soldiers one by one. And then there were the specialists. They weren't soldiers, not in the way the Drakens understood. They were operatives, hunters, ghosts. Draken warriors, built for brute force combat, were powerless against an enemy they couldn't even see. A squad of 10 Drakens ran through a ruined street. Only 3 made it out. A desperate escape attempt. On the Doomfang, an officer shouted, "Warlord, some of our systems are back online." Varric's eyes flashed with hope. "Weapons?" The officer shook his head. "No, but we can activate the emergency thrusters. We might be able to break free of Earth's gravity and retreat." Varric snarled. He hated the thought of running. He had never lost a battle. But this was not a battle. This was a slaughter. "Do it," he ordered. The emergency thrusters ignited, and Doomfang began to drift away from Earth's orbit. Other Draken ships followed, trying to escape the nightmare they had walked into. But Earth wasn't letting them leave. The trap springs. Suddenly, every ship in the Draken fleet received a transmission. A human face appeared on their dead monitors. A woman, calm and composed, wearing a simple black uniform with no rank insignia. Her eyes were cold. "Leaving so soon?" she asked. Varric's blood froze. "Who are you?" The woman smiled, but it wasn't friendly. "The one who just shut down your escape route." The Doomfang's thrusters died. Every ship in the fleet stopped moving. Varric's officers screamed, pressing buttons, trying to restart engines. Nothing worked. "What have you done?" Varric bellowed. The human woman leaned forward. "You thought Earth was defenseless. You were wrong." She tilted her head slightly. "Now let me show you what happens to invaders who come to our planet uninvited." The transmission cut. And then, the real attack began. The Draken fleet was frozen in space. Thousands of warships, once symbols of destruction, now helpless, their engines dead, their systems hijacked. Warlord Varric slammed his fist onto the dead control panel. "Restart the systems. Manually, if you have to." His officers tried, but nothing worked. The humans had total control. Then, another transmission flashed onto their screens. The same human woman appeared, her expression calm, too calm. "Welcome to Earth's gravity well," she said. "We control every signal, every system, and every piece of technology you've brought here." Varric growled, "You wouldn't dare destroy us. Surrender, and we might spare your world." The woman smirked. "Surrender? No, you made a mistake, Warlord. You started this war. but you don't get to decide how it ends. Then the attacks began. Earth's true power. The first explosions rippled through the Draken fleet, not from outside, but from within. One by one, warships detonated from the inside, their own reactors overloading. "What's happening?" an officer screamed. Another turned pale. They're using our own systems against us. The virus wasn't just shutting them down. It was rewriting their programming, forcing ships to self-destruct. The mighty Draken fleet was tearing itself apart. No mercy for invaders. On the surface, the last remaining Draken warriors were surrounded. No more running. No more hiding. Snipers had taken their positions. Drones hovered, tracking every movement. Invisible weapons waited for a single command. A voice echoed from the rooftops. "Drop your weapons. Kneel, or be erased." Some Drakens, terrified beyond reason, fell to their knees. They had never surrendered before, but they had also never faced anything like this. Others, filled with rage, charged forward. A single click echoed through the street. Then, the air exploded with fire and metal. The charging warriors were ripped apart in seconds. The remaining Drakens chose surrender. For the first time in their history, the mighty Draken warriors had been utterly defeated, and Earth hadn't lost a single city. The warlord's last choice. Back on Doomfang, Warlord Varric stared at the burning wreckage of his fleet. One by one, his ships detonated or were forced into Earth's atmosphere, crashing like flaming meteors. His army was gone. The screen flickered, and the human woman appeared once more. "Your ships are finished. Your warriors are either dead or captured." She leaned closer, her eyes sharp. "And you, Warlord, you have one choice left." Varric snarled. "I will not beg for my life." The woman smiled. "We're not offering mercy." She pressed a button on her console. Varric's control panel lit up, just for a second. Enough for him to see what had been done. A new command had been programmed into his ship, the only function still active. Self-destruct. His own ship was now a bomb. "Goodbye, Warlord." The screen went dark, and the Doomfang exploded. The Doomfang was gone. The mighty Draken flagship, once feared across the galaxy, was now nothing but debris, shattered into 1,000 burning fragments. The remaining Draken warships, those that hadn't been destroyed, were either drifting aimlessly or falling towards Earth like meteors. Humanity had done the impossible. They hadn't just defeated the Drakens, they had annihilated them, and Earth still stood untouched. The last survivors. On the ground, the few remaining Draken warriors knelt in the ruins of their failed invasion. Their weapons were gone, their armor disabled, and their spirit broken. A group of black-uniformed humans approached, the same ghosts who had been hunting them from the shadows. One of them, a tall man with cold eyes, stepped forward. "You have one chance to survive. Cooperate or disappear." The Drakens were a proud species. They had never surrendered in their entire history. But today, they had no choice. With shaking hands, they lowered their heads in defeat. The war was over. Message to the galaxy. Across the stars, the invasion of Earth had been broadcasted in secret. Governments, warlords, and empires had watched as the Draken Armada descended upon Earth, expecting an easy victory. And now, they watched in horror as the mighty warriors of the Draken Empire were utterly crushed. A new transmission went out, one sent not by the Drakens, but by humanity itself. The same calm woman who had spoken to Warlord Varric appeared. Her face was expressionless, her voice calm. "To all those watching, let this be a warning." She leaned forward slightly. "Earth does not need shields. We do not need war fleets. We do not need planetary defenses." Her eyes turned cold. "Because if you come to our world with war in your heart, you will never leave." The transmission cut. The galaxy fell into silence. And for the first time in history, the predators of the stars knew fear. The Draken Empire, once feared across the stars, was now silent. Their mighty warlord was dead. Their unstoppable fleet was reduced to debris and drifting wrecks. Their legend of invincibility had been shattered. And the worst part, humanity had barely tried. The galaxy reacts. Across the cosmos, empires, federations, and warlords gathered in emergency meetings. The footage of the invasion was analyzed, rewatched, and feared. The Drakons, with their warships and armies, had expected to crush Earth. Instead, they had been hunted, trapped, destroyed from within. How did the humans do this? A Xilari diplomat whispered in disbelief. A Zorvath strategist, known for his cold logic, spoke with unease. They never needed defenses, because they were the defense. Their planet is a battlefield. Their minds are weapons. Their technology is beyond anything we predicted. A deep silence followed. For centuries, the galactic powers had believed Earth was weak, a primitive world, unprepared for interstellar war. Now they understood the truth. Humanity was not unprepared. Humanity was waiting. The last warning. Back on Earth, the surviving Draken prisoners were lined up, kneeling before their human captors. The lone black uniformed human walked before them, his face unreadable. "Your empire will receive a message," he said. "You are the messengers." A Draken warrior growled. "We will return. We will bring more fleets, stronger weapons. You cannot win against the full might of our empire." The human chuckled, a cold, humorless sound. "You still don't understand, do you?" he whispered. He crouched, staring into the Draken's furious eyes. "You already used your full might." The Draken's rage turned into confusion. The human stood up, and it wasn't enough. He turned away, tapping his communicator. "Drop them at the edge of their empire. Let them tell their people what happened here." As the Draken prisoners were taken away, a simple message was sent across the stars. A message that made even the strongest empires shudder. Earth is not to be touched. Ever. And so, the lesson was learned. The galaxy had many warlords, many conquerors, many empires that thrived on battle. But now, they all knew the truth. You do not invade Earth, because Earth never needed defenses. Earth was the weapon.